even do that for me. AJ Brown on TikTok. Love to see it. So we have to start in the obvious place. We have to start with my great embarrassment yesterday at First Horizon Park. We have to start with my shame, which I'm sure many of you are happy to hear about. I went out. We were invited. It was a little bit of a last second, so I'm not sure who dropped out of the game, that the Nashville Sounds would contact the Zone and say, hey, does any of the on-air talent want to play?
You were an alternate?
Absolutely. I wasn't. This is apparently this thing had been in the works for about 3 months. And honestly, I didn't see it promoted very well. So next year, because it was the first time that they've done this.
I had no idea until you told me.
Right? So, and there were a lot of fun people out there for this. I'm gonna say in quotations, celebrity softball game. Because I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm some kind of celebrity because it's called the celebrity softball game. I'm just saying that was the premise of the game. So I'm not sure who dropped out. I'm not sure who I was an alternate for, but I got a very nice gift basket out of it and a lovely glove from the Nashville Sounds. It was in an effort we put on this game, or we helped put on this game, or we were a part of this game to help raise money for a program called Folds of Honor, which does incredible work for our armed services, our veterans, the families of the people who they leave behind if they are lost in battle. It's an incredible cause that we were raising money out there for yesterday. And I hope so. This was the inaugural edition of this softball game, right? So next year, I hope that we do it properly. I hope that there's proper promotion. I can't play softball well, but sure as hell I can promote well. We got to play to our strengths, because my strength definitely last night was not left field. That was a tough scene. So we go out there, and I'm on Team Terry Bradshaw. It is the event is sponsored by a great many people, but the two primary teams were Team Budweiser and Team Bradshaw Bourbon, because apparently Terry Bradshaw of Pittsburgh Steelers, Hall of Fame, Fox, NFL on Fox fame, apparently Terry's got his own line of bourbon, which everybody was very happily sampling in the dugout. I don't even drink bourbon. I wish that was how I could explain away my performance, but I will not make excuses on this day. So I'm on Team Terry Bradshaw. So Terry Bradshaw's our coach. It was incredible to meet Terry Bradshaw. He's an electric personality. Lucas asked me if I asked him to come on the radio. I said hell no. Because not only was I on Terry Bradshaw's team, it was myself, Will Compton, country singer Julia Cole. We had Jelly Roll of rap fame here in Nashville legend, 615 legend, Jelly Roll. We had Lunchbox from the Bobby Bones Show. It was a collection of characters that you would never think to put together, but ultimately we got the victory. So I don't feel that bad about my performance today because my team won. And I had a couple RBIs, which I'm totally fine with. I got out both times, but I got 2 RBIs out of it. So at least I helped contribute and pad my stats in some form or fashion. All right?
How would you describe the RBIs?
Unathletic.
Right, but like what? Was it like a sac fly, like a hard ground ball?
No, I was slapping them out there. I was slapping them out there a little bit.
Slap hits?
Oh, yeah. So, and mostly just because I made contact and the ball went into left center, just kind of skipped along and was bouncing awkwardly enough that it made it difficult for people to catch.
There you go. Hit it where they ain't.
Well, listen to me. I'm slow, so they still managed to get me out on these awkwardly hit ground balls that I was smacking around at First Horizon Park yesterday. But I haven't played softball since 6th grade, so I'm getting all over the place. We did this. I was a last-minute ad. They asked anybody at the station if they wanted to play. Nobody else volunteered. I said, sure, why not? At least if I expose myself for how unathletic, because the only sport that I'm playing lately is tennis and golf. And I'm not terribly good at those either, but I like them. And they're individual sports, and I don't have to worry about anybody else. I can just do them at my own, tennis you play with somebody else. But I can largely do those 2 at my own pace. It's been a while, probably since high school PE class, since I've played some kind of organized team sport outside of high school football. So we put this thing together. I think, sixth in the batting order. I get my RBI. I get out, but then they send me out into left field the first time that Team Bradshaw is out in the field. And I get mixed up. I think I'm going to right field. I end up in left, which was such a bad idea because Team Budweiser had a handful of athletes. Deshaun Kaiser, future backup quarterback of the Tennessee Titans. I don't know if he's a good quarterback, but the man can play softball. And he hit one dead at me, and I didn't know what to do with myself. Will Compton was screaming at me. You know, he's making me, like, adjust to the shift when we have left-handed hitters out there. Like, it's a whole deal. Because I thought it was beer league softball. You got Jelly Roll with a couple of handles of tequila in our dugout, and so I'm taking shots with Jelly Roll before we go out on the field. And then we get out there, and people are, like, actually taking it serious. Like, I'm like, oh, my God, we're actually trying to play softball here. This is a terrible idea. Not only am I in left field, but the game starts at like 6:30. So the sun is still in the air, and it is not yet set. I am in left field. I am facing west. I have the sun directly in my face. And outside of the Sounds ball cap that they provided to us and the uniforms and the very nice gloves, it was a great deal that they put on. But I got the sun right in my face. So I'm already working against my lack of athleticism. And I have the sun in my face. I say, Will, I'm screaming at Compton. He's over in right somehow for whatever reason. We rectified that situation as soon as I let the first home run of the game go right by me because I can't see anything out there. I'm screaming at Will for him to give me his sunglasses, and it did absolutely nothing. Farsender says, surprised you didn't get sunburned. Baby, I'm Egyptian. I don't get sunburned. It's that and great facial hair. That's what I get out of my heritage. It was a delight. Scott Bowen says, wait, Buck is talking about the Nashville Sounds? No, I'm talking about celebrity softball, pseudo-celebrity softball. Although, everybody else out there was a celebrity. I'm not talking.
But shout out Sounds.
Shout out the Sounds. 15 in a row. Ties a franchise record for the Nashville Sounds. They have the opportunity to break that record tonight, correct? They're not at home.
No, they're at all of it's happened at Charlotte. They're on these series they play are so long. But yeah, they're in Charlotte.
Yeah, they come back June 8th, which is why we had the softball game at First Horizon last night. So it was a great time had by all. Terry Bradshaw is as funnier a character in real life as he is on television. He was a delight. We had a great time. Will Compton is currently dragging me on the internet for how badly I played softball yesterday. In fact, I should probably bring the tweet up before I cite it. Will says, I think Buck Reising learned a valuable lesson yesterday from vocal spectator to being the athlete on the field. Quite possibly the worst softball player I've ever seen, and he should have to answer to the media and be dragged on socials.
They should have done a media availability afterwards.
Well, they were doing media availability. I mean, not availability, but they were like interviewing us, like while guys and girls who weren't up to bat, they were interviewing the people who weren't up to bat at the time, like on the sidelines. I declined. I was like, there's nothing. I have done nothing worthy of being put in front of a camera right now. Please attract less attention to me as humanly possible, which is not something that I ever thought I'd say in my life. But I was pretty sad about the way that I showed up and did not show out yesterday. But I want to do it again. It was so much fun. It's got me wanting to go out to like some kind of city softball field and practice fielding because I was terrible yesterday. But it was such a good time. A bunch of good people. Shout out to the people at the Nashville Sounds and Folds of Honor. I hope we raised a substantial amount of money for them and all of the good work that they do for veterans and for families of veterans. It was a really, really fun experience to be a part of. And we won. So that wasn't so all of my shame was washed away by Budweiser, Bradshaw bourbon, and tequila after we won the trophy that was about no participation trophies. I didn't go out there just for the participation trophy. I went out there for Instagram pictures, and I went out there to win. The umpire, who's apparently the ump for all the Nashville Sports League, like softball, like rec league teams, he's out there talking smack to everybody. And the one thing I said is I'm not going to strike out. I'm going to swing at everything, basically, And if I'm gonna strike out, I'm gonna look good doing it. And at least I look good in a uniform. I'm not gonna lie to you. I look good
Did
in
you
a
strike
uniform.
out?
No, I did not strike out. I did not strike out. But I didn't do much else. Great time though. Thanks. We really appreciate the Sounds having us out. Even if Will Compton demands that I be shamed on social media today, I'm totally prepared to be accountable. Semi-pro on Twitter says, "Can the boy not afford polarized lenses?" That's true. Will I called Will because he was late. We were supposed to get out there. I literally went from Titans practice. Well, I tell you what. Why don't I tell you on the other side what kind of softball player Will Compton is, and then we'll get into the only time that we're going to talk about the NBA playoffs probably this year, because I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off at LeBron James, and I think you should be too. All that and more coming up next. I'm Buck Reising. This is 104.5 The Zone.
We're on all your devices. 104.5 The Zone TV. Live on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and Periscope.
start the segment off. I clear my throat right before I turn on the microphone. Immediately sound like I'm drowning in phlegm. Oh, my God. It was a very unhealthy night last night, which is ironic because you're out there competing in athletic competition. Nonetheless, we persevered. 615-737-1045 is how you get in on the conversation. I can't believe that. At least we can lean into it, you know? At least we can. I don't ever want to, like, just be one of these things that tries to, or be one of these shows that covers up our mistakes. I want to lean into them. I want people to expose us and laugh either at us or with us.
Oh, we put a spotlight on them.
Somebody's got to. You know what? I'm going to pay $1 to Home Street Home. That's going to be a fine for me not clearing my throat. I mean, I tried to clear my throat, and the phlegm got me anyway. It's disgusting. So, Karen O'Keefe says on Facebook Live, glad your team won. Now, if you could just win the office declutter war, right? No, I'm going to win this war. There's no question I'm going to win this war. But we're going to start with a different kind of disappointment, because I'm disappointed in my 104.5 The Zone teammates for the clutter that we have in the studio, but not as disappointed as I was with LeBron James, not just last night, but this whole series with the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker was spectacular. 47 points last night, and I almost didn't appreciate I appreciated how good he was, but with all things NBA, and if you have an opinion on LeBron James, because we put this out to a poll on Twitter. Has your opinion of LeBron changed after this first round series? Because the Lakers are going home. The Miami Heat are already out. They got swept by the Milwaukee Bucks. You've got the Lakers already out in 6 games against, I don't think the Suns are an inferior team, even though, are a superior team. I don't think the Suns are necessarily a superior team. Any team that has LeBron James and Anthony Davis, even as Davis, shouldn't have been out there last night. He was clearly playing through injury. He all but hobbled off the court. LeBron, we'll get into it. But has your opinion of what is your opinion of LeBron, I guess? Because I think I know how the audience feels about LeBron James. The majority, the last time we talked about him, people had largely negative opinions about him. But for me, because I saw Ramon Foster chirping on Twitter last night, but this y'all's GOAT. This is LeBron James. This is who you tell me the GOAT is. And for a long time, I fought that battle. And it's not to get into one of these lazy sports talk radio conversations where you're saying LeBron versus Jordan, who's the greatest of all time, as I watched First Take, probably getting ready to do the same thing. Right after they
they're talking about Logan Paul.
I know.
Instead.
Well, you know why? Because they're smart. Because that's where the money is and that's where the numbers are. That's an atrocity unto itself. That's like me playing left field. But with LeBron, here's where Lucas and I are kind of in a tough spot. Lucas, do you remember Michael Jordan playing NBA basketball for the Chicago Bulls?
Not even a little bit.
Me neither. And this is where he and I, Lucas, we as a show, we sometimes have these knowledge gaps. I thought somebody would probably tell me, our bosses would probably tell me, say, hey, dummy, don't say that out loud, that you don't remember Michael Jordan with the Bulls. But we got to be honest with you, right? Because we're running this through our prism, our perspective, our worldview. The most exposure I've had to Michael Jordan as a basketball player is we lived in Washington, D.C. when I was very little, and he was a player was he a player manager? He wasn't a player coach. He was like a player manager, a player owner for the Washington Wizards at the end. And that game I barely remember because I was like 6 or whatever. My most exposure to Michael Jordan as a basketball player was that ridiculous. Was it 9? It was 6 parts. It was 6 parts.
Docuseries.
The Last Dance. The ridiculous. It wasn't even like, I thought that was such a sham because it ended up just being a Michael Jordan Nike commercial.
That and Space
for 6
Jam.
hours. Space Jam, right? Space Jam, a big part of my childhood. So I know Michael Jordan from Space Jam and The Last Dance. So the GOAT conversation, I'm not going to have it, not because it would be dumb for us too, because we didn't see, Michael Jordan at his heights. But I've defended LeBron James because I can go back and watch YouTube highlights of Michael Jordan and the NBA of the late 80s, early 90s, and understand just how inferior athletes in the game, and understanding that the game was played an entirely different way and that the rules are different and you see more offense. But what I will say is that when I watch Michael Jordan highlights or Bulls games from that time period, whether it's through The Last Dance or on YouTube, because we all, of course, have access to YouTube, everybody else on the court looks so much less athletic than Michael that it's impossible for him to not be that kind of special. You know, outside of probably 10 guys, nobody was Michael. That much is easy for me to discern. Whereas I look at LeBron playing in a much higher quality level of athlete. Maybe not necessarily competition, but level of athlete. And LeBron still at 36 years old can out-athlete these guys who are genetically manufactured to play basketball at a level that we've never seen. So my argument has always been, well, championships, winning, Michael. But if you're talking about the most physically talented basketball player, it's hard for me to not say LeBron. And that's how I've always done the math on it. I've tried to separate the art from the artist when it comes to LeBron James. And this series against the Suns, it was impossible for me to do because I watched him throughout the course of this 6-game series to the Suns. I watched this, and all I saw was the worst parts of LeBron James. It really, really upset me to see the behavior, to see, and I don't want to get bent out of shape about like handshake lines at the end of games, but you are a bona fide Hall of Famer. You are somebody who is by far and away a generational athlete, unlike any that I've ever seen in my lifetime, certainly. Tom Brady is probably in that same mix, but like in terms of true like feats of athleticism, I've never seen anybody do the things that LeBron James is capable of doing. Kevin Durant is another one of these extraterrestrials, but LeBron is something else entirely, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but I think most people understand what I'm talking about. And I could not, in this series against the Suns, watching the way that he acted, watching the way that he was unable to bail his teammates out when they needed him the most, understanding that Anthony Davis, the health has been uncertain. It feels like the Marcus Mariota situation. He's always questionable with something. And so Anthony Davis tried. I will give him all the credit in the world. He was out there. He absolutely should not have been. He was limping off the court at the end. I hope that Anthony Davis does not do more harm to himself just because he's trying to prove people that would make the Marcus Mariota always questionable with a something joke at his expense. It's not worth it in those instances. But LeBron James, I don't want one 6-game series, disappointing though it may be, for the kind of player we all know him to be, even at this advanced age. I don't want one series and the way he acted during this series to completely tarnish my entire opinion of him, but I definitely have a lower opinion of LeBron James this morning than I did 10 days ago. And that I'm disappointed by it. It sucks. Because you want it, I don't know. It's not a don't meet your heroes type situation. I've never met LeBron James. Probably never going to meet LeBron James. So it's not like I've had a personal interaction to where he did something that made me feel disappointed by his actions. And he does not have many publicly bad moments for as much spotlight is on him. But I could not help but sit there and look at him like, dude, just Luka said it best in the green room, and it's not something that we could say on air, but like, shut up. Just, which I hate. I don't want to do the shut up and dribble show. But LeBron, just
taking
stop,
your ball and going home.
Stop. It's like we did with the Preds and the social media thing, which turns out may not have been real, which now I feel a little bit bad about for how hard I went at the Preds social media people, but it happens. I apologize. But it's so take your ball and go home. It's so whiny. It's so, I don't know. Like, if I did something like that, okay, I'm not LeBron James. You're LeBron James. I look up to you as a 27-year-old who has seen your entire career and knows who you are and what you're capable of and all the good that you've done both on and off the court. I have legitimate respect for LeBron James, and his public actions, his passive aggressiveness, in a way, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I really hated to see that last night. 615-737-1045 is how you weigh in on the conversation. Charlie is in Franklin. He wants to talk about LeBron. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, can you hear me all right? You went out.
You sound great, bud. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm 5'8.5". I played in 1956. I played against one of the greatest basketball players in all of the world. It was, of course, Oscar Robertson. I got 3 charging fouls that called on him because he pushed me over. Now, why am I making the call? The call is that LeBron James followed Shaq and Charles Barkley in this shoving match. And when the NBA started to allow this charging and bullying basketball, in my opinion, LeBron James took advantage of it. It's not maybe his fault, but he should have been called. He should have been out of the game in most games in the first quarter by his aggressive pushing, shoving, knocking people out. But since they allowed it, I guess I can't be against it. But all I'm saying is when a man gets between you and the basket and he runs over you, that's charging, not blocking, not tic-tac fouling. That is charging. And why the NBA allowed it to go on is beyond me, and I'm still a big NBA fan. But it almost destroyed me watching the Lakers anytime LeBron was playing. That's my comment.
Hey, thank you for the call, Charlie. 615-737-1045. It felt a little off topic because we weren't talking about the rules of the game right now. Although, listen, if LeBron uses the rules to his advantage, I'm not mad at LeBron for that. I'm mad at LeBron, the role model, the icon. I mean, role model he's not any less of a role model. I just didn't like what I saw from him. You know what I'm saying? Like go ahead.
Devin Booker is a guy that has likely looked up to LeBron James his whole life, right? Devin Booker's what, like 24?
I'll find out.
He scored 47 points last night. And I know LeBron's shown Devin Booker love on social media and stuff before, but for a guy like Devin Booker, to see him walk off without any handshakes or anything, taking his ball and going home, like that doesn't feel right.
Devin Booker is 24 years old. It sucks because Devin Booker's probably excited as hell. He put 47 on LeBron James and the damn Los Angeles Lakers to knock them out, to send them home. And all credit to the Suns. I hate when we do this because this is something that's you can criticize any sports talk, outlet of doing what I'm doing right now, which is we're not talking about the team that won the game, the team that was most impressive. I brought up that Booker had 47 points. I brought up that they've been the more impressive team in this series, but we're not talking about the Suns and their victory. We're talking about LeBron James and a loss because this is what we always do. And I hate that. But he's something that everybody has an opinion on, that will always be polarizing. And I have always not understood it, really, until last night, or at least until the course of this series. I've really hated to see how LeBron James has been behaving, especially when you've got guys in the league like Devin Booker who have basically I know Devin Booker's been in the league a while. He's been an impressive player, certainly an impressive scorer, as evidenced last night and throughout the course of this series. But for exactly Lucas's point, Devin Booker probably thinks that sucks too, even if he doesn't say so publicly. 615-737-1045. Seth Campbell on Twitter says, Buck Reising, some mad grandpa energy right there. Oh, he's talking about Charlie. The game is different. Charlie's right. But yet, this is kind of, Charlie understands that the rules have changed. Because didn't Charlie call in and complain about free agency? When we first started the show, I'm pretty sure that was Charlie.
I think you might be right.
I'm pretty sure that's right. And we had to tell Charlie that the rules have been, Charlie is obviously aware. He's a sports fan. But basically, yeah, Charlie, the rules of free agency and the NFL have been like this since the 1990s. There's nothing we can do about it now. Them's the rules.
I did just get a DM from DJ Skinny showing me a Sports Center tweet that LeBron did gift his jersey to Devin Booker after the game.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, that is good, of course, and not everybody saw. I mean, I guess it's tough to like nitpick that way because it's not like I'm saying LeBron James is flat out a bad guy for the way that he acted during a 6-game series in a loss to the Suns. I'm not saying that. I just say what I saw, the fact that I stayed up after this softball game last night till about 12:15 a.m. to watch LeBron James pout at the end of the game and just look sullen and mope. I hate that. 615-737-1045 is how you get in on the conversation. Jeff is in Nashville. He wants to talk about Michael Jordan. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Buck. Well, we could spend a lot of time talking about Michael's athleticism and LeBron's, but LeBron's spectacular, so I'm not going to talk about that. But I stayed up till 12:15 last night too, and LeBron, even though I like LeBron and I've rooted for him in many games in the past, he was a punk last night. And that's all you can say. I mean, he not just refusing to shake hands at the end and walking off, but there was a defensive play where he needed to get back on defense, and he stood at the other end of the court.
Yeah.
And, it's not the leadership that you would expect from a guy like him.
That's why I'm so disappointed, Jeff. And we all hold players like this, stars like this, because what was it, Tom Brady and Nick Foles in the Super Bowl, where Brady doesn't shake his hand after the game, and then the Bucs lose to the Bears because Brady forgets what down it is, or not because Brady forgot what down it was, but that played a role in it. Against Nick Foles and the Chicago Bears, one of the few losses that the Bucs had last year, Brady again doesn't shake his hand. Like it's one of these situations where I want to appreciate greatness. I want to appreciate greatness in real time. I want to enjoy these guys and the level that they compete at and all of the ability that they have in real time. And we have such high expectations for them. I don't want to take them for granted, but then these small things that become the hype that just become so you just lock on to them because you do hold these players to such high expectations. These generational stars, like the two names that I've just mentioned, that when they do have these moments, we immediately lock on to them and say, well, that really sucks. And normally I don't feel like I'm that person. I know, I mean, Lucas could probably be a better judge of this than me. Lucas, do you consider me to be overreactionary? Like, I know I'm loud. I know we do a different kind of show, so it requires me to be a different kind of loud. But I think that at least from my perspective, I do feel like I try to make the conversations nuanced. Am I incorrect on that?
No, I mean, certainly when it comes to Titan stuff and the teams you report, I'd say it's pretty measured.
Wait, what do you mean on the other?
Everything else.
Gas bag.
No, fairly measured. We try to keep things fairly measured on this show.
I think it's just my tone people don't like. There's nothing I can do about that. But it just it left me, like Jeff said, he was a punk last night. And I hated that because I don't think of him that way. Most people do. And I for the longest, I haven't. But it seems like it's popping up more often now. And that stinks. 615-737-1045. Casey is in Lewisburg. He wants to talk about LeBron. Go ahead, Casey.
What's going on, man? So I think this is LeBron's personality. I mean, I feel like he's acted this way his whole career, really, and we're just now really seeing it because, I mean, he's just really now started losing on like as a consistent basis, if you want to say that. But I don't think you should hold it against him as far as his whole career. Or look at him in a different way. Because, I mean, he's a great humanitarian, a great father. I mean, he does great things for the game of basketball.
No question.
Outside of basketball.
No question. And that's not necessarily true, Casey, because LeBron James, they didn't win a lot when he first got to Cleveland. Like, the first couple years for LeBron were a struggle. Now, he didn't have a lot of great talent around him. And they did have to gut it out. It's why the Miami Heat thing became such a big deal because I'm taking my talents down to South Beach, and that's where people's opinions of him, the way that he handled that, the way that, frankly, ESPN handled that, it kind of snowballed. And I think both parties would go back and look at that and say, yeah, that was probably not the right decision. But I see you guys have loaded up the phone lines. We want to get to your opinions. We want to take your calls. We're going to get to Titan stuff later on, too, because, of course, we have Coach Mack of Titans Radio. I was out at OTAs yesterday. I'm going to tell you what I saw, who I did, and who I didn't see. But we'll continue the conversation about LeBron James with your phone calls coming up next. I'm Buck Reising. This is 104.5 The Zone.
You've heard that name times infinity the last few weeks, and it's still going on. Julio Watch.
I mean, if you can get a player like Julio Jones, yes.
That word rhymes with Rulio.
Who's seriously the contenders for Julio Jones?
All anybody seems to want to talk about?
I said Julio.
Mas Julio.
Like the Julio Jones thing is going on so long.
We keep following the story wherever he signs. And if he becomes a Titan, you'll learn all about it here.
Julio, get the stretch.
All day, every day, here on your home for the Titans, 104.5 The Zone.
That we'll get into coming up next. We'll go back to your phone calls on LeBron James, 615-737-1045. Dwayne is in Nashville. He's been waiting patiently. Go ahead, Dwayne. What you got?
Hey, my man, just real quick, man. I think we've been a little hypocritical when it comes to LeBron James.
Please.
He's a professional athlete playing at the highest level.
Of course.
When you lose, of course it hurts. Just like any other human being, you're going to show disappointment. So in that moment, he let his emotions get the best of him. But I don't think we should be as hard on the man as we're being just because he's being human. That's all I got, man.
Hey, you know what, Dwayne? I think you're spot on. I mean, like I'm saying, like I said earlier, I don't normally do overreaction, and this feels like it's borderline for me. Because you're right. I mean, he's in front of a camera. The camera is always on him because of who he is, because of what he is, because certainly of who he plays for right now with the Los Angeles Lakers. Every move he makes, every facial expression that comes across, bad or good, we are going to hyper-analyze, over-analyze, over and over and over again. And so to say that's hypocritical, so I don't know how to put it into context. Like, I sucked at softball last night, but my team won, so I wasn't that beat up about it. Now, did it make me want to go practice, fielding some grounders and take some batting practice? Yeah, I think that would make a difference.
Did anybody walk off with no handshakes?
Not that I saw.
Was there any bad blood?
Oh, well. Yes, but no names I think I'm allowed to say on air. No, I kid.
Nobody throwing hands last night?
Nobody throwing hands. I mean, maybe some people in the crowd that were too drunk off this Bradshaw bourbon that Terry had brought. It's provided the whole stadium. I mean, it wasn't a packed house. It was like, I don't know what the capacity for the sound stadium is.
No one got beaned by a pitch or anything?
I mean, I thought about calling in somebody to throw at a particular individual, but we will. No, I'm kidding. We'll save that for another day. So but I understand what Dwayne's saying. Like, if I have a bad show, or if I suck, let's do it this way. If I suck during an interview, say Mike Vrabel comes on the radio show, and now that you guys can watch the radio show, it's on camera. I'm on camera 3 hours a day for the radio, and then about an hour every night for the A to Z Sports Primetime Show, which, by the way, I did in the middle of the celebrity softball game, which I think I deserve props for. I thought that was pretty impressive, but let me not brag on myself. So say I'm interviewing Mike Vrabel or some high-profile athlete, coach, person in sports X, all right? And I'm having a hard time getting my words out. Maybe it's like the start of the show where I got a bunch of phlegm in my throat and I sound like I'm drowning. Like, you guys will be able to see if my confidence sags. You'll be able to see my body language. You will be able to see if I'm having a bad interview. Now, obviously, this is a much, much lower profile than LeBron James on national television in the playoffs with the Lakers. But that's the best prism that I can run it through. Now, are people going to come in the chat and say, you suck today, you're being a crybaby, don't mope so much, pick yourself up, ask a better question, get your words out, mush mouth, whatever. Like, sure, that's going to happen, and I'm prepared to handle that. But there's a difference between people chiming in on the chat or people leaving comments on Twitter because they've heard the interview, as opposed to physically seeing what kind of face I'm making. Like when that crazy dude, well, not crazy, but when Ken called in to support the Hatworks thing, which I found offensive. We made a clip out of it, and you saw how much my facial expression changed when he said, "Yeah, I don't think the Jewish star." He said the Jewish star thing, the Star of David. Anyway, I'm not going to get back into it. But he said he didn't understand why it was so offensive. Lucas saw the face I made, and now that you guys can watch this and we clip it for social media, you guys can go back. Like, we made a TikTok out of it, for God's sakes. My face, Lucas's face, and then, the rest of the call. So I understand what Dwayne's saying about being a little bit hypocritical in that. Eldon English says Lawan is sitting and waiting for that day when I botch an interview and he can just roast me. I mean, listen, it happens.
He's got to come on the show to do an interview first.
Coward. Yeah, you know what? I think because he didn't show up to the softball game last night either. He wasn't supposed to play because obviously he's rehabbing, but he He was supposed to coach like Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw out there hanging out, signing autographs, kicking dirt on the ump because he didn't like the call. It was a whole deal. And Terry Bradshaw is a gem, a national treasure. He must be protected at all costs. But, Lawan doesn't show up to the radio show, doesn't show up to the softball game. Coward. Go get him on Twitter. 615-737-1045. Caleb is in Nashville. He wants to talk about LeBron. Go ahead, Caleb.
Hey, guys. I just wanted to say a big thank you to LeBron. I know he's listening right now, but anyway. But I just wanted to say a big thank you to LeBron just because I was like 8 years old when he came in the league in 2003. Watched the NBA exclusively because of LeBron James. And now I think he's kind of turned himself into the Harvey Dent quote, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain, because now when he's gone, he's just been getting on my nerves. And now when he leaves, it's just going to be easier to see him go. I think he's probably toward the end. So I just want to give him a thank you. He's made it a little bit easier now for me to see him go out of the NBA. So that's my take on it. I'll hang up and listen.
Because Caleb brings up a good point, right? We've seen this a couple times in sports and it happened a little bit last year with Tom Brady, right? Where people love LeBron in Cleveland. He goes to Miami. People hate LeBron. When he goes to the Heat, he goes to the super team. It's the most, people hated that Heat team outside of the city of Miami largely. People were so vicious about their criticisms of the original, maybe not the original Big Three, but the best Big Three that we've seen probably since this Brooklyn Nets team that's playing right now.
I think Tom Brady is far more likable on a wide scale now than he was at the Patriots.
Well, let me finish my point. Look at you so anxious to get in there. Shut up.
I'm just saying.
Back into the shadows.
You made the comparison.
I haven't finished the comparison. You got in there too quickly with your point. Relax. What I'm saying is, when LeBron went back to Cleveland, he was again likable. He won a championship for Cleveland. Everybody celebrated LeBron. Good guy in Cleveland the first time, bad guy with the Heat, good guy when he went back to the Cavs. Now this fourth chapter, for lack of a better term, of his career, you've seen the cycle start to turn again. I think Brady is in the middle. Brady was with the Patriots for so long that it's been the same story for 2 decades, that when you get a little bit of fresh air with Tom, you see his behavior on social media. You see the way that his team likes to use memes. You see the way he goes back and forth. You see how much more fun he's having in Tampa Bay. People started to like Tom Brady more. LeBron is a good example of this. Hell, Alex Rodriguez is some kind of national media darling now after Pedro Gomez was chasing him through parking lots in Miami, asking him about congressional hearings over steroid use. A-Rod was banned from the sport, and now he's the most popular sports media member probably in the country, which, is inexplicable to me, but if you can get it, it's good business. Shout out to A-Rod. 615-737-1045. Paxton is in Nashville. He wants to talk about LeBron. Go ahead, Paxton.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Buck. So here's the deal, all right? I am a police officer, okay? So the way that I carry myself is constantly being watched. There are things that I deal with when I'm in my work that, I have to be better than let's say the average person would be in a situation, okay, because of the job. With great responsibility and great influence comes great, expectations, man. And that's just what LeBron has to realize. I get that he's a human, but in the spotlight and in the moment, you have to stop and think, do what's expected of you in the spotlight. Go back to the locker room, man. If you have an issue, go back to the locker room, let it out. Just like when I go home, I can talk about things. I can, decompress, all that good stuff. But when I'm in the spotlight, when I'm in the street, I have to uphold myself to a higher standard. So that's my issue with LeBron and with the way he's acted and the way he's been acting. And this is the reason why I don't really care for his game. None of the greats would have been this way, doing this thing. MJ, Bird, Magic, all the greats acted accordingly. Who knows what they did when they got home, Buck? That's not our business, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there, man. I'm very disappointed in the way he acted, and I'm very disappointed in his actions. So I'll hang up and listen, Bug. Thank you again for what you're doing, buddy.
Hey, appreciate the call, Paxton. Thank you for all you do. It's vastly more important than what I do. Oh, by the way, we had a couple people. Anyway, what I'll say is, Paxton, social media has changed everything. There was not the kind of access to Michael Jordan that there was with LeBron, the greats that we're talking about. It's a totally different world. LeBron James has so many more ways that you can see him, so many behind closed doors, even as LeBron has been good at keeping things or keeping all of it out, almost all of it out. There's still so many ways that we can now hyper analyze everything that he does because of how quickly the information gets to everybody on social media. But I absolutely understand what you're saying. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's happening in the world of NFL media and why it is bad for you as the consumer. That's coming up next. I'm Buck Reising. This is 104.5 The Zone.
More Titans talk than anyone else. What a catch! Your home for Titans football and the flagship of Titans radio. 104.5 The Zone.
home or, watching us on Zone TV, wherever you are, and saying, well, what the hell do I care whether you can go back in the locker room or not? This affects me none. And I would say to you, I understand why that's your perspective, but it does. Here's the struggle, right? Because I think, and this isn't to get into like some kind of journalism diatribe, right? Because that's not what I'm going to do here. I don't feel the need to do that. Journalism is under scrutiny for a great many reasons, and it's because a lot more people have platforms, and a lot of people have been reckless with the platforms that they have, and it's created a great amount of distrust. And this is in the silly world of sports even. I'm not talking about like larger media issues, even though it all kinds of gets lumped into the same thing. What I see what I think when I see this, when I read this article, is I hate this so much for a variety of reasons. Because Titans Film Room, our buddy over at Broadway Sports, tagged me, Teron, Kaharski, and Rex Road in this tweet. Quote tweeted and said, would be curious to know what local Nashville media thinks of this. And, not largely, by consensus, all four of us are saying, yeah, we hate it. Yeah, I'm reading Teron's tweet right now. I hate it. Locker room access is something I love to have because that's where you get to talk to the players about more than just football. You build relationships and trust, which allows us to deliver better stories to fans. And Teron adds, because he does great film breakdowns with them, he says, I also like to go over plays with them in there. For me, it's the same thing. This show is fun because we have pre-existing relationships with a lot of these guys where we can, Will Compton is a different matter entirely, but like Brett Kern or Darren Bates or Dennis Kelly, those are all relationships that I've had the ability, and, whether LaJuan and I are chirping on social media or not, those are a handful of examples of relationships that I have created, that I've been lucky and fortunate enough to create with the guys that I work with on a day-to-day basis, the professional athletes, the guys in the Titans locker room, which I have covered for heading into, this will be my 5th year covering the Titans full-time as a reporter. That creates better content. Not only is it a good benefit for me, because I don't want to act like this is some kind of noble cause. It's for the fans. We do it for the fans. I mean, we do it because it's our job, and it's a good time, right? I'm not denying any of that. But what I'm thinking is, over the past, we are now in month 17 of COVID, for lack of a better term, even if it feels much, much less like that now that we're over a year removed from it. What I experienced, Zoom made the press conferences and the covering of a football team a lot more efficient. I don't have to travel anymore. I'm going to travel now that the games are going to be more normalized, hopefully almost all the way normalized. But last year, it didn't make sense for me to go to their season opener in Denver for a 9:20 local time kickoff where, there's nobody in the stands. Everything's going to be on Zoom afterwards. Saves me a bunch of time, effort, and energy. It saves, at the time, A to Z Sports, who was paying for my travel to go around and to travel to the league or travel around the league with the Titans. Saves them a lot of cash for hotel, for travel, for, all of the things that it takes to send me to games. And, when that game ended at when we finally got done with the game, I think it was probably close to 12:30, almost 1 o'clock in that Monday Night Football game, the Monday Night Football doubleheader. I was happy to be on my couch at home to be able to do the Zooms and then just go to bed afterwards. I'm not in Denver. I don't have to schlep from the stadium to a hotel and then get up or not even go to sleep, maybe take a shower and go straight to the airport like I did after a couple games in 2019. It made it, for time-wise, makes a lot more sense. But here's where it sucks, not just for me, but for the audience. We are all four of the people that were tagged in that tweet, the entire Titans media corps, the same for every other NFL franchise around the league and the people that cover them. The fans miss out because there's less diversity of storytelling. There is less ability for us to get to know these guys and then to relay the things that we've learned, the conversations that we've had that may not be, in a scrum setting or where we're all getting the same quotes at a Zoom press conference because we're all feeding at the same trough, for lack of a better term. Dark Galf on Twitch asks, does not being able to go to the locker room cut down on your ability to build relationship with the athletes? Does it hurt with vets or rookies? Of course. I never got to know Jadeveon Clowney. Never once. We had one Zoom call with Clowney over the time that he spent here in Tennessee. After all the time that we spent talking about him, after all the things that he went through during the season and that we covered from a distance, not getting to know Jadeveon Clowney, I think, does the athlete a disservice because you don't have the opportunity to tell your side of the story. That's always been, and I'm not alone in this, I'm not unique in this, I don't think, but anytime that I'm getting ready to write something or talk about something, whether it's on the radio, the podcast, the A to Z Sports Primetime Show, whatever it is, before I formulate my opinion, I will go to the individual that is involved or the individuals that are involved, and I'll say, hey, what's your perspective on this? Help me fill in the holes that I might be missing because you know a lot more about what happened than I do just from watching it in the press box. I have the ability to do that in the locker room outside of less than I would at a podium with Mike Vrabel, less than I would, on a Zoom call with, like yesterday, Jayon Brown, where everybody hears all of our questions, and the athletes are being asked, the athletes are there where we're waiting in line to ask them the questions, and everybody gets the content afterwards. It makes it so much more bland. And I think that does a disservice to the fans. Now, there's a bunch of, we'll get into this more on the other side because I want to talk about Titans OTAs, and you're going to hear from Ryan Tannehill on restructures and about this Julio Jones conversation because I think it gives you good insight into where the Titans are in this pursuit of him. So we'll get into more of this on the other side. And as I said, you'll hear from Ryan Tannehill. I'm Buck Reising. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Getting you set for Titans training camp. Bam! Your home for Titans football and the flagship of Titans radio. 104.5 The Zone.
a pretty in-depth discussion being had on Twitter right now between a handful of us Titans media members about, what's happening with our lack of access and what it means for the fans. Again, we try not to make it, or at least most of us, it feels like, try not to make it about ourselves. But, this is the only prism that we can run it through. You're also going to hear from Ryan Tannehill here in a second, because he gave some pretty good insights about, where the team is kind of in their pursuit to get Julio Jones based on what he said. But to kind of put a plug for now on this situation with the Titans and the NFL keeping their locker rooms closed to the media for the foreseeable future, with, it sounds like, some in-person interviews possibly happening, maybe press conferences in small group distance settings. The biggest issue for it ultimately is that the league stays this way, that the league finds a way, to keep us, for lack of a better, I don't want to say keep us down, because we're still going to find ways to do our jobs. Everybody has to adapt. It's fine. But the thing that's kind of holding this all up is I don't think that many players are vaccinated. And everybody has their own reasons for choosing to get vaccinated or to not get vaccinated. And I'm not sitting here judging, but like, for me to not be able to wear a mask at practice, I have to show proof of vaccination, which is, I'm fine to do that. I'm double vaxxed up. I got my shots. Send me out there. Love to see it. Love to be out there, back out there without a mask. But it sounds like a majority of players aren't right now. And so the league isn't going to make them, but it does inherently create a barrier between us and them, because they're never going to tell us how many dudes aren't vaccinated. It sounds like it's enough to cause a problem, because if they're exposed without being vaccinated, it increases their risk personally. And more importantly, to the league, it increases the league's risk of losing money, because games having to be moved around and COVID outbreaks and players potentially missing time, star players, all of this stuff, which is what this is mostly about. I imagine there will be some kind of incentive for dudes to get this done before camp, but I don't know. And at what point this changes, because it's not like this is going away anytime soon. I don't know if vaccinations are going to be an annual thing or not. I have no idea at this point. But I really hate the idea that that I'm going to have to do my job the way that I did last year. And I think that's to the detriment not just of me, but to the radio show, to the audience, to the people that read me. I'm not trying to be like, oh, we're doing this for you guys, but like, the content that we produce is for you guys, not for me. I'm not reading my own stuff. I'm not listening back. I probably should listen back to see when I screw up and be better, watch the tape and improve. But it's not like I'm listening back to the information that I'm giving you on the radio, or I'm not listening back necessarily to the podcast or the primetime show. We're doing it for you guys. It's what we're paid to do. And this is inherently making it harder for us to do our jobs. But let's talk about something that you guys probably have a little more investment in, at least in the immediate. Of course, Julio Watch rolls on. Now, Josina Anderson had a report last night while I was playing in this softball game out there at First Horizon Park. So I didn't see it until later when I got home. Now, what Josina had to say was an update on Julio Jones from an NFL team, from a source with an NFL team that had provided her context into what is happening right now with Julio. And I'll read the tweet for you right now. Source, tonight on the Julio Jones situation. This is from @Josina Anderson on Twitter. I told Lucas we need to try and get Josina on. I'll see if I can't figure out a way to get in contact with her. Source, tonight on the Julio Jones situation, in part, quote, everyone is giving the Falcons time to think about it. This from one team preferring to deal a high mid-rounder for the 7-time Pro Bowler with 6 straight 1,300-yard seasons before last year, and for Atlanta to take on a good share of Jones's salary. Now I don't know this to be so perhaps I shouldn't recklessly speculate. But as we talked with Michael Giannitti yesterday of Spot Track, I'm going to say Spot Track. That's what I've decided on. I hope that's right. Spot Track, SPOTRAC.com, where all the financials for the NFL and apparently every other league are available to you as well. This, to me, coming from a team that wants Atlanta to take on a good share of Julio Jones' salary, that doesn't sound like the Titans. Now, that might be reckless speculation on my part, but just based on our understanding of where they are and really all that they have to do in restructuring Ryan Tannehill's contract to create the room to bring in Julio Jones. Now, maybe if there are other moves on the horizon, which is entirely possible because, they're still looking to upgrade their tight end position. How they go about doing it remains a mystery at this point. So it may be that the initial offer was like, yeah, we'll give you a high mid-rounder and you're going to pay some of this salary. Maybe that's their initial offer on the table. Then maybe there's a way to negotiate down. I don't know. I don't want to put out something that sounds like a report that's not actually a report. I'm just talking myself through this as I read this tweet. But what Ryan Tannehill had to say yesterday, I thought was very, very interesting because it falls in line with exactly what Michael Giannitti told you yesterday on this radio show. And if you missed the podcast, go check it out. The Buck Reising Show in your favorite podcast app. Ryan Tannehill was asked, not about Julio, but about John Robinson and whether Robinson had approached him yet for a restructure. This was what the quarterback of the Tennessee Titans had to say.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to John. He's going to have to figure that out if that's something that we want to do as an organization. I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But if he comes to me, then we'll have that conversation then.
If he comes to me, then we'll have that conversation. Now, people on the internet, because the internet is a dumb place, took this out of context, asking like or acting like Ryan Tannehill was saying, yeah, if he comes to me, we'll talk about it. And the response was, well, they don't have to ask him. They could just do it. Why is he being so difficult? No, it's stupid. Pay attention to what he's saying. Lucas, let me hear that one more time because I want to make sure people are paying attention to the last part because this is where I think it's important. This is Ryan Tannehill yesterday with the media.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to John. He's going to have to figure that out if that's something that we want to do as an organization. I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But if he comes to me, then we'll have that conversation then.
If he comes to me, then we'll have that conversation. Meaning that John Robinson hasn't yet come to Ryan Tannehill about a restructure, meaning that conversation has not yet been had. This falls in line with what Mike Giannitti was saying yesterday on this radio show. The Titans are right to sit on their hands, and it falls in line with Josina's reporting. Quote, everyone is giving the Falcons time to think about it. Time to think about whether they're going to continue this. I believe it to be a bluff, a first-round pick on the table, depending on who the team that is offering a first-round pick and how high of a first-round pick it might actually be, becomes a different conversation. But everybody's sitting back in wait-and-see mode. And Ryan Tannehill is saying, yeah, they haven't approached me for a restructure yet. Here's why that's okay. Because I think people got bent out of shape about it, saying, what do you mean they haven't asked him about restructuring yet? They need to do this immediately so they can trade Julio Jones. No. I understand that you're impatient. I understand that some of you need some Julio Jones news. It's like smack at this point. You're trying to tap a vein. I get it. But they don't need to restructure Tannehill unless they have a deal imminently for Julio Jones. Why are you going to bump Ryan Tannehill's cap hit to almost $40 million next year without knowing whether you got Julio Jones in the bag? This is again, all of this is tied together. It's 6 degrees of separation with Kevin Bacon, except make it Julio Jones. Ian Rappaport saying that this could drag out until training camp. That was the first kind of sign that you saw. Things may go further than this June 2nd soft deadline that everybody kind of had in mind. Or the first opportunity, more accurately put, the first opportunity for the Falcons to move Julio Jones because of the way that the finances worked out. So what the Tennessee Titans are doing is what everybody else is doing. You have our offer. We will see. We will see whether you are willing to accept our calling of your bluff, basically. Because Atlanta seems to be hard and fast with this. We got Mohamed Sanu off the books for a second. That means Julio Jones is going to cost a first. Julio. That's what they're going to say when you catch a pass. What you're going to say. What they're going to say when you catch a touchdown. They don't even do it for me. Julio. It's a name on everybody's lips. Ryan Tannehill not being restructured like right now is okay. They don't need to do it until they've got, if they have, Julio Jones in the bag. Now, what I'm curious to know is who else is actually in this thing? Because it really sounds, again, Clowney Watch Part 2, it really sounds like it's just the Seahawks and the Titans. Lucas, have you seen anybody else that's like, I know we talked about the Ravens, the Rams in and out already on this conversation. There have been talks about the 49ers because
that's what I was going to say.
Kyle Shanahan's pre-existing relationship with them.
Like I've seen reports from the Athletic 49ers beat writers breaking down, here's what the 49ers could do to acquire Julio.
Well, yeah, that's because that's what everybody's doing right now. At the Athletic, basically, and I know this because I got a bunch of friends that work at the Athletic, everybody that is within a reasonable doubt of Julio Jones, their editor said, okay, create the circumstances for a deal for your team to trade for Julio Jones because it's crack.
But it's just a situation that he could be interested in being reunited with the former offensive coordinator that could use a number one receiver.
Certainly. And they would immediately, no matter who's at quarterback, whether it's Jimmy G or whether it's Trey Lance, they should be among the favorites for Super Bowl contention to win the Super Bowl. They should be right up there with Kansas City and Tampa Bay because that's who everybody's trying to gun for at this point. It's not the Ravens. It's not the Steelers. It's not the Saints anymore in the NFC. Maybe Green Bay, but every year that seems to get a little more hollow, it feels like. It's the Bucs and the Chiefs. And if you're nowhere close to those two teams, most people aren't, everybody is going to say, consider trading for Julio Jones. Find a way to make the finances work. It's just easiest for the Titans to do it financially. But Ryan Tannehill saying there that he's willing to have that conversation if John approaches him. It sounds like at this point, John has not approached him for a contract restructure. 615-737-1045 if you would like to jump in on the conversation, if you have thoughts on Ryan Tannehill, Julio Jones, or anything in between. Maybe you have thoughts on the current wide receiver core, minus Julio Jones, because I certainly do. We're going to talk to Coach Mack about this later on in the show, and specifically, you'll hear from Kevin Byard as well on the other side of the ball because Kevin Byard, Ryan Tannehill, Jeff Simmons, among the vets that were out there during this portion of OTAs, this phase. About 19 new players, I believe, Rhett Bryan spotted out on the field from last week, which is important. But what we're going to get into is how you feel about this current Titans wide receiver core. Because I don't know if it's just as more time passes and I have more opportunity to watch film, that I'm slightly more comforted by it. There are obviously deficiencies with what they have now on the roster, understanding that it's not just about the wide receivers, it's about the tight ends as well. There are deficiencies on this offense that, I mean, it's critical. If they want anything to do, if they want any kind of smoke from Kansas City, they've got to upgrade in some way, shape, or form. But I want to know, what is your confidence level in this Titans wide receiver core as currently constructed? It's Chester Rogers, it's Marcus Johnson, Des Fitzpatrick, A.J. Brown. You've got Cameron Batson out there, Josh Reynolds, who I saw for the first time yesterday, and Racey McMath. That's excluding a lot of the undrafted players who are out there during this portion of OTAs as well. What I would be curious to know is the idea of Josh Reynolds growing on you at all? Because people were it's just one drill that most people videotaped yesterday at practice that went on the internet, and there was a lot of criticism to be found. But the more that I watch this guy, the more that I'm made to feel a little better. And honestly, it's not even about the wide receivers. I'll tell you who it's about coming up next. I'm Buck Reising. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Ramon Foster brings 11 years of NFL experience to the table. As for J Mart, he's a guy who talks.
That explains a good bit, doesn't it? It definitely does.
J Mart and Ramon, Monday morning from 6 to 10.
104.5 The Zone.
around to hear, but I think you're also going to find what we're going to talk about here almost as important. Coach Mack, by the way, Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio, is going to join us within the next hour. So, what happened yesterday, to completely shift gears in terms of sports, was the end-of-season Preds final press conference. It's David Poile and it's John Hines, GM and coach. There's a handful of things that I was curious to learn resulting of those press conferences that I've had a chance to go back and read a little bit on A to Z Sports Nashville.com today. Alex Doherty does a great job on reporting on the team. He does a great job writing for my buddies at A to Z Sports over there on the website. And today he's got his reaction piece to their press conferences yesterday. I want to know what I guess the thing that I wanted to know most was what David Poile really thought of this team. Because we're not only looking at expansion draft, we're looking at, what do you want to say, season disappointment? I mean, did we decide whether we felt like the season was a disappointment or success? I know that's a dumb, sports radio thing, but you know what I'm saying? I don't know that we made a determination.
Yeah, it's going to be, the season was enough of a success to not make David Poile want to blow it all up.
Which is basically what he said yesterday, but he went a little further than I expected him to. Because David Poile, he seems to, I mean, he's got an interesting position coming up, not just because of the expansion draft and who they will have to decide whether to protect or expose, understanding the two highest paid players on the team potentially could be on the list of exposed players in Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson. But what Poile had to say yesterday about, I guess, the core of this team and the direction that it's heading in, I found quite interesting. This was from the Preds GM yesterday.
Well, all of those teams, in my opinion, have an identity. And as I talked last year here, and as I'm pointing out today, I think that we lost that along the way. I believe that we've got that back now. I brought up the Predator way a couple of times because I think that I say that in the context of meaning that we're going in the right direction. I think we've got a lot of good things going for us. I think we integrated a number of younger players that maybe we weren't sure about or we hadn't given a chance to any point until this season. So I feel that the roster is working in the right direction. But having said that, we have to be better, and we've got to have some of our players play better. I can't, as I say, I'm proud of our play and I'm encouraged, but again, I think we can be better. I don't think, other than some of the younger players since it was the first year, that anybody had what you could call a career year. And I expect with the growth of our team and the way we played and the way John has been coaching the team, that some of our players will move towards a better year and more of a career year, if you will, whether that's based on how much they play of ice time or it could be in production. So do I think we're as good as the top teams in the league? No, and that's reflected by where we finished in the standings and the fact that Carolina beat us in the playoffs. So I think we've got a long way to go, but I'm encouraged by what we've accomplished this year. And again, I think if the season had ended in the after 20 or 25 games, we'd be in a much different position.
It's David Poile yesterday speaking to the media. It's his and John Hines' end-of-season press conference. So he said he felt like they regained their identity a little bit, and he's definitely disappointed, as he said, that the season is over. But, quote, I do believe that our changes helped bring us the identity that we wanted. So what is the Preds' identity? Lucas, I think, put it really well in the green room when you kind of juxtapose them against Carolina. If you want to tell the audience what exactly your analysis was.
I struggle because there's a few cliches in there that you just hate to use, but it's a defensive, aggressive, resilient, physical mentality that is a big reason, besides UC Saros, why they were able to force their way into the playoffs. We talk so much about the herd line, how big a role that line played with Sissons and Trennan and whether it was Jeannot or Olivier, in getting into the postseason. Well, the herd line just goes out there and hits people. And they had a little bit of production, but there's no question that's their biggest impact on a game. So that was basically their identity going into the postseason, besides great goaltending, and that's something to build around if you can get good production from your top-line forwards.
Oh, sure, they tried to brute force their way through it.
They did.
Whereas Carolina is the much more skilled and talented team at this point, and it ultimately ended up bearing out that way. Jeremy, because we put it to a poll, have the Preds, or did the Preds regain their identity this season? 58% of the audience so far, of course, we'll update the polls at the end of the show, 58% of the audience says no. Jeremy Neasley says the identity that the goalie and young kids carried the team for weeks until the vets came back from injuries and lost. I don't think that's a fair assessment.
Because there was a huge mentality shift mid-season. Like, literally just effort.
Yeah.
Like, the increased effort was a big reason. Forwards coming back on the back check. Like, there was little things that they were not getting in the first half of the season that they did in the second half. And I think that does have to do with the mentality change and identity change.
And the results were obvious. And also UC Saros was spectacular. Like, that's not a mental thing. That's just a goaltender, as the cliche goes, since we're using them, standing on his head for basically entire second half of the season and for as long as he could hold on in a Stanley Cup first-round playoff series. I don't know what to make of it, because I'm still pretty skeptical of David Poile at this point in his career. Because for me, when I look at general managers in a position that Poile is in, where he's, the majority of his career is behind him, I'm not one of these people who's going to, speaking of cliches, I'm not going to be one of these people who does the game passed him by type thing. I don't think that's stupid. I don't think that's true either. But in terms of sustainability and the stewardship of the franchise long term, David Poile's obviously trying to take steps that he thinks are going to put this team in a position to win within David Poile's window, which is not uncommon. But what does it do for the future seasons of the Nashville Predators? How do the moves that he's made affect the future of the ability of this franchise, this team, to be able to sustain in years to come? The Duchesne and Johansson contracts, they have been underwhelming, I think, is a kind way to put it at this point. Underwhelmed by the performance of two players who are paid like stars and expected to be stars, certainly in the postseason when it matters the most. And again, there were some highlights. There was also disappointment as for their entire season. So when he says he's happy with the direction of the team, they look better at the second half of the season than they did during the first. But in the playoffs, the problems, and Lucas, tell me if my assessment on this is wrong, the problems that plagued them still found a way to rear their head, basically, in the middle of that postseason series. When you're talking about power play, when you're talking about lack of consistency from the stars, like Philip Forsberg is a highlight reel. Philip Forsberg also appears to have peaked at this point in his career. He's kind of inconsistent as a player. He shows up a lot. The highlight plays are great. And then all of a sudden you're asking, well, where did Philip Forsberg go? Why isn't he producing at this level? Is it not the same theme? I don't sense a change of direction outside of they saved themselves from bottoming out and having to sell the whole thing off at the deadline. But honestly, I don't think that would have been a bad thing.
I also think his words mean a commitment to the coaching staff and a belief in where the coaching staff has this franchise headed. Doesn't mean he's not going to make big changes to the lineup. Core guys, Phil Forsberg will be back next year.
Yeah.
Has another year on his deal. I think he wants to remain in Nashville. And it's interesting, too, in the media availability, players, too, the other day, hearing players say, I want to stay, I want to talk to Poile about staying, and then Poile saying, yeah, we want to talk to Pekka about staying. These are not open conversations that you see in the NFL. So I thought that's interesting, hearing what Philip Forsberg had to say the other day. So there's a couple core guys that are going to stick around, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be big changes made. I think that might be more of a commitment to this coaching staff and the job they did in turning it around. But, yeah, the deficiencies stuck around in the postseason.
It's a better way to read that. I think you're spot on, because John Hines earned that. He earned sure. that kind of trust by his general manager. I think if you could say anything about the Preds' performance outside of UC Saros, second on that list, I really liked what John Hines did, the way that they adjusted as a staff, as a coaching staff. John Michael J. on Twitch says, yep, our first line is awful defensively, couldn't score. Houston, our young talent, got us into the playoffs. Listen, coaches always get too much credit when things are going well, and too much blame when things go poorly. But I do think, because we talked about that yesterday with Shane Bowen, same kind of situation. I do think that John Hines is to a degree responsible for the levels of success, the opportunities that they had, and then there was a lack of execution by the players. It's a good way to interpret that. When we come back, we'll get into the Titans conversation. We'll talk about the wide receivers and why I feel okay about them right now without Julio Jones. You'll hear from Kevin Byard, Coach Mack as well. It's all coming up in the final hour. I'm Buck Reising. This is 104.5 The Zone.
So, chatting Titans? Well, it's our favorite pastime. Your home for Titans football and the flagship of Titans radio. 104.5 The Zone.
it's voluntary, remember. That is so important for these guys trying to get their comfort level under control here in Nashville with a new team, whether they're rookies, whether they're free agents that have been brought in, guys off the street, basically trying to find their role in this offense. I'm not saying that they're good enough at wide receiver. I'm not saying that they're good enough at tight end. What I'm saying is my concern is brought down by a substantial degree because of the guy who's responsible for getting them the ball. We'll talk with Coach Mack about this coming up next. Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio. Always enjoy his presence. That's what we will do, and we will break it down in more detail because Mack was out there at OTAs with me yesterday. I'm Buck Reising. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Believe me, they sound better than they look. 104.5 The Zone TV. Live on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and Periscope.
if you've been to enough OTA practices, you really can tell the difference with the infusion of the vets.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it just is not as segmented. It's a little more smooth. And even though you've got some brand new people coming in, just a veteran presence with everything is a little bit not only of a calming presence, but it's also a presence that makes things run more efficiently because they just know how to transition from one drill to another. And they also know how to transition, in tempo. And so that's the main thing that I saw yesterday.
Yeah, the operation felt and looked a lot cleaner. It felt more. I mean, I know I got to keep my powder dry, Mac. I know it's not a practice.
Yeah, you do.
I know it's not a practice, but it looked and felt a little more like one. Mac, when you're talking about the integration of the vets and the rookies during this process of the offseason, during this phase, you as a coach, is it incumbent upon them, the players, to be able to find ways to mesh? Are you involved as a coach in that at all? Are there ways that you can set them up to be in a better position to kind of feel each other out, to understand each other? Or is it, I mean, I'm assuming it depends based on the coach. I know Vrabel likes to remove himself from the locker room because that's the player's space. But I'm always curious about the dynamic and what role a coach plays in that.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you make about, because the locker room is the player's space. As a coach, I never invaded that space. I always felt welcome in there, but that's their place. But you talk about being able to integrate everybody together. What you cannot do, and every team every year, especially now with free agency and the salary cap, every team every year is different. I mean, with 30% of the people flipping it, it's going to be different. Just the entire mindset and the entire just feel of a team. And so that has to happen organically. But there are some things that you can do as a coach as far as the way you set things up as to where you make that transition a little smoother for everybody. And the first part of that is, Buck, we already experienced it when we saw the rookies in here by themselves.
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing, to let them get comfortable, not only, with what's going on with them, but what's going on with their surroundings. And then you bring the vets in, and a lot of that depends on the type of locker room aura that you have established and the type of ability that you've established as an organization with your players, that the players are carrying the message of what you want. Because you can sit up there and you can talk all you want in front of a room. I've done it for years, and unless the players on the team that have a voice are taking that message to the locker room, then there's something missing. And so that's all part of this process that's starting now.
Well, and you can see that just for the fact, Mac, that this is a voluntary portion of the offseason. It's not an uncommon situation to have your starting quarterback here during this phase of the offseason, but Ryan Tannehill showing up brought, at least from my perspective, a substantial more amount of the vets back to practice than I might have expected to see. I think it sets such a good precedent, such a good example in the way that you're talking about of leadership and of command to be able to translate that message from basically management down to the players and carry that out onto the practice field, not just in the meeting rooms, not just in the lift, where they're lifting in the weight room together, not just when they're eating their meals together as they do at this time of year and throughout the course of the season. What kind of impact does a starting quarterback showing up during the voluntary portion have on a team?
Well, it's huge, because that's got to be your guy, and that's your fulcrum point for your whole team, and that's why it's important, and you can see it. And look, the quarterbacks that reach that type of level in this league, they know that it's important too, because they understand what needs to happen, and it's not like you are coming in and the players are being forced to do anything that is ridiculous. As far as what's going on.
Right.
The part that this thing is so important about is coalescing everybody together. And this is a new receiving group, for the most part. And these guys, they knew Ryan Tannehill because of what Ryan Tannehill has done, especially the last 2 years in his career here. But you've got to get to know somebody, and the only way you can get to know a person is to talk with a person and be around a person, and that is what's happening now.
Which feels like it's gotten a little lost over the course of the last 16 months when we've all been separated. Face-to-face interactions, fortunately now easier to come by. It makes all the difference in the world, certainly not just on the football field, but just in day-to-day life. It's made a big difference for me, I'm certain.
You and I, we've talked, at practice about how just freeing it was and it felt to be at practice without a mask on.
Yeah.
Because we're fully vaccinated and it just, as you say, in the greater scope of our society, you can start seeing that, everywhere. You just watch Broadway opening up downtown. I mean, the whole thing makes a difference, and you take it down to the scope of the National Football League in a team setting. You talked about eating together. They could not eat together last year.
Right.
I mean, you know that. I mean, they'd go in and get a box lunch and then take off and go back to the hotel or go home and have a Zoom meeting. So all of those things that are progressing now are extremely important, and everybody needs to be a part of the process that pushes it forward.
Mac, Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio here with us on 104.5 The Zone, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans. Mac, A.J. Brown, obviously one of the notable names not out there working through his rehabilitation process as he recovers from offseason surgery. Tannehill talked yesterday about the benefits to this new wide receiving group for both him and for the players of A.J. not being out there. How beneficial can this time be from a rep standpoint for all of the new faces that have come into the Titans pass-catching group?
Well, I think that's what I didn't hear Ryan, but I think what you're alluding to and what he was possibly alluding to is the fact it's more of a chance for reps from guys, but not only reps, Buck. I mean, you're at practice and you see it. It's not like they're rapid firing through these reps.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a time for Rob Moore and for Ryan Tannehill now as the quarterback to get with these guys and start talking about nuances and say, look, this may have been the way you ran a speed out where you were. This may be the way you ran, a three-step bang route. This may be the way that you ran that deep corner route where you were. But here's how I'd like to do it, and here's what we work on, and here are the steps that Rob Moore teaches, and here's my release point before you ever turn around, and all of those things. That's what's important. And it's not that you just go out there, start running full speed, and see who can run the routes the fastest. That's not what's happening now, and especially with the new receiving group. All of those nuances, and we will see it. We will see it progress, and there will be some times as to where there will be some struggles with it, throughout the training camp process. That's why I think, Buck, that this year the 3-game preseason is important. I think it's very important because that piece that these rookies that were here last year missed, you could tell that they missed some of that. And that's going to be important, for them this year, and plus the new people that you have, not only the new people you have as rookies, but the new people that are joining your team that happens every year.
On the other side, John Moss writes in on Periscope, Coach Mack is the man. It's absolutely so. That's why we love his presence all over these shows, not just here with us on Fridays on 104.5 The Zone. We love to see it.
Well, you tell John Moss on whatever medium you were talking to him on that Coach Mack very much appreciates it. And that's why Coach Mack loves doing what he's doing. That's why I'm so happy that it's opened up again, because now I can be out downtown among the fans, and I love it.
Mac, I got 4 different monitors in here with like 4 different social media platforms. Now that they put us there, we never should have been put on camera, at least on the radio side of things, outside of Dawn and maybe Ramon Foster. Like, I don't think any of us need to be seen while we're doing this, but now they can chime in on these screens. So I'm literally just reading a stream of comments while doing the radio show. It's the degree of difficulty is much different.
I think that's outstanding. I really do like it because that type of access, and I love that. And I'm sure you look really good on camera, Buck. Don't sell yourself short.
No, it's true. I appreciate that, Matt. Coach Dave McGinnis with us here on 104.5 The Zone. Let's flip to the other side of the ball because, of course, we spoke to Ryan Tannehill and also Kevin Byard yesterday. Mac, I want to play for you a little bit of Kevin Byard audio talking about the work that they're focusing on right now specifically because, of course, Byard cited how historically bad their defense was as a unit on third downs. This is what Kevin Byard had to say.
Something that was really talked about for us last year was obviously a historically bad year on third downs. So I think that's something that we're stressing a lot, just this OTAs of being better on third downs, really being aggressive, stressing, not being so far off. It's third and short, making sure that we're getting up on these guys, we're challenging. We feel like we can play with anybody in this league, so we have to go out there and show and prove every single day at practice and continue just to get better at those little things.
Communication and third downs is something that was the theme of the entire defense last year, Mac. Bayard's working with a handful of new faces in this secondary. What are you seeing from them right now, understanding that it's early? What kind of did you take away from the work that they were putting in on third down specifically, third down scenarios specifically yesterday at OTAs?
Well, not anything earth-shattering yet. I mean, this is very early, but going back to Kevin's, what he said is 100% true. And the important part about it is you've got the people that are important player-wise. I mean, the coaches knew it. I mean, they knew during the season that was not acceptable, and so did the players. And so it's something that you have to refocus on because it wasn't good. They know it wasn't good, and they know it wasn't acceptable. And so the thing that you have to do is you're not going to. It has to happen. It has to happen in real time. You're not going to solve all of that at once. But the first part about solving any problem, especially when you're talking about schemes or you're talking about execution on a football field, you got to recognize there is a problem. Because the worst thing that can happen is to have something not be successful and to say, the cliche, "Oh, we'll be all right." Well, no, it's not all right. And clearly Kevin Byard and this defense and this coaching staff has the mindset that it wasn't all right. And so you go through the process of getting it fixed. Now you're going through that process with some new players, which is fine. You've got to do that. But whether you had success in the previous season or you had some really critical areas that weren't successful at all in the regular season, in the preseason or the season before, what you have to do is start again and to start getting it implemented, ways to fix it. But the first thing is admitting that it wasn't good, and they've done that. They've done that from the start. They did that during the season. I mean, the thing about the National Football League, Buck, and you know this, and so do your listeners and the fans. The fans are sophisticated here. The fans are really loyal to this football team, but they're also sophisticated fans. And so if it's not good, they know it, they see it. And so if you acknowledge it, as a coach, I mean, I've been in this situation before, where I've acknowledged, no, we're not doing, instead of trying to be, defend yourself, just get it fixed. That's what they will do.
So, Mac, it seems obvious, at least from this standpoint, understanding that they've largely retooled this defense to try and address some of these issues. But and knowing that Bud Dupree and Danico Autry were not out there yesterday, but the core that they have brought in to kind of be this new Titans defense, maybe not in scheme, but certainly in personnel, what is it about the new players that they've added that's going to allow them to play with more aggression, like Kevin Byard is talking about, play more up on the wide receivers, not allow so much cushion that caused Titans fans watching from the stands and watching on television to have such great angst about why they're playing, 8 or 9 yards off the wide receiver in certain situations. What about this group makes them able to do that?
Well, I can't tell you that, Buck, until I see them in stress situations. Yeah. I can't tell you that. I mean, they clearly, have brought people in that have the ability. I mean, I've been on a team. I was on the team that drafted Janoris Jenkins when he came out, and I mean that's been his MO throughout his entire career. I've got a pretty good book of knowledge on him, the way that he plays out there on the edge. But I can't tell you that until I see how these guys react time after time after time in a stress situation. And it's not only going to be just one play that all of a sudden you're going to say, okay, well, they've got it forever. You never have it forever in the National Football League. But what you have to have is a mindset that you are going to attack it forever. Whatever the issue is, that's the mindset you have to have. But for me to sit here and tell you, oh, well, I can tell you now that they're going to be, just perfect just because of the guys. I haven't seen those guys in that stress situation. One thing I will never do is lie to our listeners.
Well, that's why we love you around here, Matt. Coach Dave McGinnis on 104.5 The Zone here with us, presented by our friends at Farm Bureau Health Plans. Mac, you coach us through it each and every week, just like our friends at Farm Bureau Health Plans do. I played in a softball game last night for Terry Bradshaw's softball team. I put in quotations celebrity softball because I'm not putting that moniker on myself. But I could have really used your help because Terry wouldn't give me nothing out there. It was a rough scene for me. I needed to figure out how to activate my lower body. I looked like I was stuck in the mud.
Well, first of all, Terry Bradshaw's a great dude. I got to know him pretty well during the 8 years that I was a coach there in Arizona because I had Joe Green on my staff. And so Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris and those guys, they would come to practice. to see Joe, and then I got to know. And Terry Bradshaw's outstanding, and I'm sure it's a charity function, correct?
100% for Folds of Honor. It was a really, really good cause. They let us use the Sound Stadium last night here in downtown.
Oh, that's beautiful. The other thing I would say is this, Buck. You're really good at what you do, with all of those screens you were talking to me about.
Yeah.
Stay off the athletic field.
Mac, there was a handful of, like, Deshaun Kaiser was playing for the team against me. I'm like, I can't be out here. I should not be exposing myself for the professional athletes. I spend a lot of time in front of a microphone criticizing.
You were doing a good job, Buck, for the charity. You were doing a nice job, but don't get out there and get it twisted about why you were out there and then blow a ham or blow an Achilles or do something like that, because that time for you has passed.
That's the kind of coaching I need. Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio, kind enough to give us some of his time each and every Friday on 104.5 The Zone. Mac, enjoy the weekend, brother. We appreciate the time as always.
Thanks, Buck. Same to you. See you.
Oh, goodness, he's so right. Lucas, next year, you and I ought to just get in the booth. Like, you and I ought to just call the celebrity softball game. I think that's the best utilization of our talents. Because, like, I'm walking out there to the stands afterwards because I got to go grab my wallet, my keys from Dara, my girlfriend. She was kind enough to, be my support while I embarrassed myself on a softball field. And she's up there with a handful of friends, and one of her friends is Anthony Ferkser's girlfriend, and Ferk is there with him. So I jog up, and Ferkser's laughing at me because I've just had my at-bat, the one where they threw me out. It's fine. I got my RBI. That's all I care about. I looked terrible doing it. But I said to Ferkser, I said, the next time I get in front of a microphone and say anything about something that you guys did or did not do athletically, just tell me to shut the hell up. And he said, yeah, I have video now.
You want to just be my analyst next time?
Yeah, that I could do. The softball, I mean, listen, I would do it again. I had fun, even if it's at my own expense, especially for a good cause.
Let's get Slay out there next year, and you and I call the game on Zone TV.
Ooh, I like that. We should put this. We should implement this plan. God knows it's going to take us a year to get it together. So I'm sure it has to go through some kind of legal function. It's how everything is in this corporate world. At least that's what they tell me, Lucas. You know what's not corporate? It's the polls. The polls are the one thing that's still free. We'll do them coming up next. I'm Buck Reising. This is 104.5 The Zone.
You've heard that name times infinity the last few weeks, and it's still going on. Julio Watch.
I mean, if you can get a player like Julio Jones, yes.
That word rhymes with Rulio.
Who's seriously the contenders for Julio Jones?
All anybody seems to want to talk about?
I said Julio.
Mas Julio.
Like the Julio Jones thing is going on so long.
We keep following the story wherever he signs. And if he becomes a Titan, you'll learn all about it here. Julio, get the stretch. All day, every day, here on your home for the Titans, 104.5 The Zone.
Actually, I don't know what I wanted to talk. What I wanted to talk about before we got to the polls. Lucas, I've been buttoned up all week long, and I just started to fray as soon as we got to the final segment.
I too have no idea.
I was sitting there looking at my phone, trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to get into, and it immediately just evaporated from memory.
All you said to me during that break was, "Hey, Jelly Roll followed me on Twitter."
That's true. That is true. Jelly Roll, man. I don't know how this man, I don't know how he operates the way that he does. It's a special kind of human being that can, I mean, there was at least a bottle and a half, if not 2 bottles of tequila taken down during a 7-inning softball game. And that, it was a team effort. He brought it for the team. He brought it was literally a cup of tequila that he poured me for the pregame shot. It was warm, because it was hot yesterday. It was just a plastic see-through clear cup of Casamigos. And I took the whole thing down. I swigged it, and I immediately wanted to vomit into a trash can.
Yeah, I rebuked that in the name of Jesus.
I like tequila, but that's a tough one. That's a tough one for me. Jelly killed it. Absolute envy. It was between him and Lunchbox from the Bobby Bones show for the MVP of Team Bradshaw. Of course, my team, the victorious team, for as bad as I looked out on the softball field yesterday. It was all good. But with that being said, we need to wrap up the week the right way. So why don't we play a little poll question, Russian roulette?
I don't know who you are, but I know what it's time for. A poll update on the Buck Reising Show. Here's a young man with a very particular set of skills. With the final numbers, here's Buck Reising Show correspondent and producer, Lucas Panzica.
Liam Neeson, does Rhett Bryan do your voice better than you do? No. Delights me every time. What are the polls?
How comfortable are you with Titans wide receivers group? Comfortable, cautiously optimistic, or concerned? Majority, 52% of nearly 600 votes say concerned. 43% are cautiously optimistic. 5% are comfortable.
I'm definitely not comfortable. And I don't necessarily think, here's what I'll say, okay? Because we can't report on interactions because that violates the rules of reporting that they give us before we go out on the practice field every day. But I will say that the only person who spends more time watching the wide receivers than the media is John Robinson. He's hovering out there, man. So I think I am cautiously optimistic, not because of the wide receivers that they have, as we talked about earlier in the show. If you missed any of the show, it's the Buck Reising Show in your favorite podcast app. Subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, all of it. 5 stars. Love to see it. I'm cautiously optimistic about the Titans wide receiver group, not because of them, but because of the quarterback. I really, really have a lot of confidence in Ryan Tannehill. I don't know why anybody else wouldn't, understanding that the talent that he's working with has taken a substantial step back. I think they're going to be okay.
Farsender says cautiously optimistic as it is now. I think Fitz, talking about Dez Fitzpatrick, could surprise us Titan fans in a positive way.
Oh, sure. I mean, he could surprise you either way. You have no idea what he is.
Joel says comfortable knowing Julio will be there. And Josh says Tannehill already has a stud in AJ. The rest will work itself out.
AJ, why don't you give him a call real quick? Let me hear it. Why don't you give him a call?
Did the Preds regain their identity this past season? 57% say no, 43% say yes. Preds and Threads says, where's the meh option?
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. I think that fans who are voting on that are products of recency bias because they're pissed about the way that it ended. It got a little sloppy at the end, a few mental mistakes for the Nashville Predators throughout the course of that series. I don't think it undid any goodwill necessarily for what they did to get there. But I think if you're going to say disappointment, success, Pred season, whatever, I think the correct answer is meh.
Yeah, I mean, what they did in the back half of the regular season was very, very, very impressive. And what they did in the front half was extremely disappointing. So I guess you got to kind of meet somewhere in the middle when you think about the season as a whole.
Nuance. Love to see it.
John says, hard-nosed play, struggling and inconsistent offense, first-round playoff exit. We're back, baby.
That's right.
Has your opinion of LeBron changed after this first-round series against the Suns? 77% say no, 23% say yes.
I mean, 77% of you hated him before, so.
Right.
Speaking of recency bias, that was me last night. Like, I was really pissed off at LeBron yesterday. I didn't like the behavior. It's the first time that it's really struck me in a way that's bothered me. I understand that the flopping has always been a thing. I understand that the complaining to the referees has always been a thing. But, like, LeBron's behavior in a loss in a series that they should have decidedly won. By the way, Lakers Heat bubble frauds. The bubble entirely fraudulent.
Especially the Heat.
I mean, the Heat sucked. Bam Adebayo looked bad. Who's the kid from Kentucky? Tyler Hero looked terrible. Like, they both substantially took a step back. And the Bucks, Bucks are a really good team. So
there does need to be like a data analysis report on how much better players did in that controlled environment of the bubble as opposed to how they just play in normal settings on the road at packed arenas.
I'm certain somebody will do that after the NBA season is concluded.
Not us.
Not us.
Will Tennessee and Vanderbilt baseball both win their regionals this weekend? 63% say yes.
Tennessee plays at 5, and our buddy Mike Wilson from the Knoxville News Sentinel reported that we didn't get to that today, which is unfortunate. We can talk about that on Monday if any new developments come out. But Mike Wilson, our buddy from Knoxville, reported that Tony Vitello is expected to get a fat extension, making him one of the highest paid coaches in college baseball. Now, how many SEC baseball coaches did you say were making over $1 million?
Six, I believe was the number, yeah.
Without Vitello.
And he is making $600,000, not including incentives, which he has certainly hit this year, not including some of the cutbacks, voluntary pay cuts he took because of COVID.
Yes.
So it's somewhere in that range, about a little over $500,000.
Well deserved. As I said, they play at 5 tonight. What time does Vandy play?
I believe 6, but I'll double check.
Well, and of course, Nashville's team, Trevecca.
Right, and that first pitch coming up in a few minutes.
Okay.
Well, in Cary, North Carolina, the Division
that
II.
Via stream.
Last one of the day is Lucas Panzica a D-bag for having 6969 as his phone passcode.
You know what? That's what I wanted to talk about before we did the poll.
62% say yes.
Yeah, this D-bag I was on his phone because he does the polls, he does the tweets from my account for the most part during the show. Like from 9:30 on, Lucas Panzica controls my Twitter account, which sometimes causes me great angst. But he asked me today, hey, why don't you phrase this tweet more how you would phrase it? Because I hate the cliche, hey, here's what's coming up on the radio
Yeah,
today.
I'm tired of speaking for you.
Yes. Okay, well, do it better. Do it better. Have some creativity. One time. So he hands me the phone. He says, why don't you phrase this tweet more how you would phrase it? And so I got distracted, and I started doing something, and I said, I accidentally closed the phone. Why don't you unlock it for me? And he said, yeah, the password's 6969. I stopped in my tracks. For how immature you are.
Okay, it's easy to remember. It made me giggle a few years ago, and it still does. And it makes you giggle, and it makes a lot of other people giggle.
Do I look like I'm giggling? No, I think less of you as a person.
Big Joe on the Go said, please grow up and have a professional show. My kids are 7, 4, and 3, and they follow you on Twitter. I have to explain to them about his passcode and why Daddy giggled. So grow up.
I'm sure Big Joe on the Go, Joe Dubin from Channel News 4, is giggling very, very heavily.
It's easy to remember.
No pun intended. At Lucas's 69 joke. Nice. You know what else is going to be nice? Blaine and Mickey, because they're going to get you a little closer to your weekend. So you're going to enjoy it. It's coming up next.
Getting you fired up every weekday afternoon.
I'm telling you, man, I'm fired up now.
I know you are telling the truth, dude. Blaine and Mickey. This afternoon, 1 to 3.